Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast, where we help you move, excel, and inspire others on your journey to your next level with knowledge and advice from experts and testimonials from our like-minded community.
Molly, I want to welcome you to our Beyond Physio podcast. I'm very excited to get to know you better after this episode. And you have a lot of cool things to talk about, including your journey to somatic therapy. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted you on our show is because we have a lot of people in our audience who are always trying to seek different ways that they can become the best version of themselves. One area that I need to learn more about so that I can help educate our clientele is on this topic of somatic therapy. So as we start, can you share with us your journey into somatic therapy?
Wow. Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Just met the other day.
We met in a cool way.
Yes. So Molly and I raced at the PV Tri. Her mother, of course, beat me, who was a ridiculous triathlete. But it was your first triathlon back from 10 years ago, I believe.
This is correct.
Yes.
Yes.
And so what's interesting is I think how this whole journey began for you in somatic therapy. I think that was the main thrust of how this all happened, right?
It was a huge part.
Huge part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go into that.
Okay. Yeah. So what I shared with you at the PV Tri was that I had done that same race 10 years ago. Later that day, I had like a traumatic accident where I felt so invincible because I had just done this triathlon and trained for a while for it. Experienced like kind of a near death moment where I ran onto this bridge that my friends and I used to sit on and watch people walk underneath. And I was so excited. I ran onto the bridge and I lost my balance and I fell backwards. And I really thought that I like had wings in that moment. I was like, I'm just gonna grab onto that bridge and climb back up and everything's going to be fine. But I was mid-air, and I'm not a superhero. Spider-Man was my first superhero movie, so that was like deep in the recesses of my brain. Not something I can personally do, of course. But then Goddess, the voice of spirit, said to me, bitch, you better catch yourself. You're falling backwards. This is not where this story ends. And I listened to her. It felt like the only option that I had. And so I turned around mid-air and I caught myself on all fours, but my chin kept going. And I broke a bunch of teeth and I broke my jaw in 3 places.
So you can actually see this happening in sort of like real time as you're going down too.
Yeah, it was so fast. I don't think I could fully observe what was happening, but the body does this amazing thing where it can put you into shock. So you're not really feeling pain. You're in this kind of like dissociative state. I was in some kind of happy, blissful delirium where I knew something was wrong because I couldn't bend my left leg. And when I turned around to ask my friends what was going on, they were freaking out, and I saw like my teeth on the floor and like on the ground, and a tooth had lodged itself into my upper lip right here. So I knew something was awry, you could say. This moment catapulted me into the career path and personal and professional life that I've been on for the last 10 years because I was in desperate need of help. And I had always really enjoyed helping others. It's a huge part of who I am, and I can share more about that.
Yeah, definitely.
But in that moment, I knew that if I ever wanted to help others, I needed to learn how to help myself. And so I had some very, very incredible, helpful people, including my sibling, who did chair yoga with me. And my mom gave me like different supplements for bone health.
As you were recovering.
In my recovery. Yeah.
That's powerful.
My jaw was wired shut for like 2 weeks, so I was on a liquid diet. And then I found physical therapy. Not so common for like the jaw to be worked on.
Definitely more of a niche. Yeah.
It's a niche. Yeah. And I found my way to becoming a yoga teacher. I was in a 9-month training, so I literally birthed a whole new version of myself. And then in that time, I also applied to grad school, and it was 2 completely different master's programs.
Tell me.
So I got accepted to a social work program at Columbia. And then I also got accepted into a dual degree program in itself for special and general education from a school called Bank Street in the city.
So you did basically two.
Yeah. So I was in school
High
for 4
achiever.
years. I was working.
Wow.
I was teaching second, third grade at a special ed school, living in Harlem, and I would take the train an hour there and back every day to teach
Yeah.
and then take classes.
Wow.
And I think of that time in my life so fondly. I learned so much at that school that I taught at.
Mm.
And I loved working with kids. I learned like an incredible amount that's part of my toolkit.
And do you think that things would have been different now had you not had that?
Yeah.
So you would have been on, what kind of track were you on at the time had you not gone that route?
Yeah, I didn't realize I was being reckless with my energy, but clearly something was demanding my attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
I had just graduated from college and I had graduated with my degree in sociology and a minor in psychology, and I took a lot of dance classes. It's a school that's really well known for modern dance. I took Tai Chi, I took yoga, I took something called contact improv, which is where you
really cool.
basically like remain in contact with the person and learn how to like give and take in terms of weight, energy.
Yeah.
It was really scary because it was so intimate in a way. But all of those things, like I was already on this kind of like interested in somatics track. I just didn't know what that word was. I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah.
I did theater while I was there. So all of these things have always been like a huge part of my healing and like something that creates homeostasis for me, including nature. I guess there was something about feeling maybe complacent after I graduated where I didn't totally know what I was going to do next. But then this fall was like, you know exactly what you're going to do.
But it's interesting because your whole educational background in both masters too, how that sort of gave a great foundation too to supplement what you are doing now with somatic therapy.
Definitely.
Is there a definition or has someone defined what somatic therapy actually means so that our audience can better understand what that is?
Totally. Yeah. I love that it's like becoming more a part of the zeitgeist. Yeah, I think it's cool. People are talking about it.
Yeah.
To define somatic therapy, the word soma just means body.
Right.
So it just is a body-centered experience, healing. I would describe somatic therapy as it's sometimes helpful to talk about what it's not. So a lot of therapy or a lot of education, a lot of a lot of pedagogy is top down.
Yeah.
So the brain is at the top. It's like the hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's the boss, and we're supposed to listen this way. And everything else is kind of secondary. I kind of like to think of humans more like plants, which I think we are, not divergent at all from the plant kingdom. We are nature. So if we are going to heal ourselves in a way that is connected to like organic processes, we might look at something like a bottom up experience, like a root system that works, that like sucks nutrients out of the soil and then brings it up into like a blooming situation. Obviously, plants get like healing from sunlight also, but it kind of brings it down to be processed. And then this blooming happens up. And so somatic therapy is an experience of centering and honoring the messages that come bottom up from the body.
So it sounds like it's almost like a ground up kind of thing in some way.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, interesting. There's actually in pediatric physical therapy. There's a gentleman named Cuevas. He's from South America, but it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about, where a lot of us, hierarchical to neurodevelopment, and he approached it differently with the kids that he was treating because a lot of them had CP and other sorts of disturbances or issues with the central nervous system. So he approached it from addressing the body, almost from the body up. And the results he would get using that when I was treating a lot of pediatrics at one point in my life, I was floored by the results I would get because these kids, we can't communicate in a way that's meaningful for them. They don't understand. Okay, but by helping them understand the movement, by not forcing, by encouraging the movement that needs to be done, they understood what had to be done. And then the brain kind of kicked in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how you say that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about that person.
Yeah, definitely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And using the word magic resonates.
Mm,
It is magical.
yeah.
We're speaking in a different language.
Hmm.
It's the language of the body.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially when you're talking about kids,
Yeah.
they are so porous, they're picking up energy. So something like
Always.
linguistics is such a cerebral experience.
Exactly.
Unless you're like using your hands and your body and
Yeah.
you're like
Yeah.
speaking something like this,
Right.
then you're like, oh, I can get the gist of what someone's expressing
Exactly.
because we're so expressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so much more, than
Yeah.
just this.
As they say with public speakers, right? It's more about how maybe what you've done, what
Mm,
you've gestured in some sort of presentation that can be more meaningful for somebody versus what
yeah.
you've said. And I can see that rings true actually in many circumstances. One of the things that fascinates me is even just the topic of chronic pain.
Yeah.
So we've one of the things that we're known for is actually dealing with or helping people to get the results they've been looking for from other places they haven't been able to get. Sometimes even with that realm, we see a lot of people with chronic pain. They've
Definitely.
tried everything. They've
Right.
tried even going the medication route.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's helping. And sometimes I feel like there's definitely a domain here that is not in the traditional realm
Mm.
that could be better served by people who can access that differently. Just because there's a lot of deep emotional trauma sometimes, a lot of deep pain. I've worked with clients in the past where they've had this chronic sort of hip issue. One person comes to mind actually, and I was sort of working the hip, just started crying. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, did that hurt?" She's like, "No, I was just reliving this abusive
Mm.
trauma I had with a family member."
Wow.
And that struck me as a new grad coming out of school. Like I was not prepared for this,
Mm-hmm.
and how much of that of our bodies becomes a reservoir for emotional baggage and
Yeah.
whatnot. So over the years, I've either through rolfing or through other somatic kinds of therapy, even deep tissue work at the time
Yeah.
when I was in California before I became a physical therapist. It was very fascinating to understand that there's a lot more to pain than just what we see physically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that has to be sometimes dealt with a team approach, whether it
Mm.
be with even psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
with other therapies and massage therapy, and now I'm looking into as somatic therapy as one other route.
Cool.
It's almost like this whole team approach as to how we can really better this one person because it's a
Mm-hmm.
multifactorial issue,
Mm-hmm.
not just musculoskeletal, and oftentimes it is a musculoskeletal.
Sure.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm so moved by this story
yeah,
and how you're approaching it and how you're leaning into what's necessary to help one person.
yeah.
I mean, that
I've
phrase, like it takes a village,
absolutely 100%.
it's always true.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny because as I'm getting older and into this, just thinking about sort of like how can we make the experience even better. I feel like we're also attracting the right kinds of people in our lives where it's like I have surgeon friends, as I was mentioning before, who
Mm-hmm.
they're like, I don't want to cut. I only have to cut when I really, really have to.
Yes.
But I'd rather try to do a team approach. I'm like, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So it's almost like we're almost like this growing this sort of movement of like-minded professionals who are like,
Mm-hmm.
let's just try to get this person better. Let's see who we can lean on in our network, who
Amazing.
might be able to, hey, this is something that Molly can see would be
Yeah.
helpful with.
Yeah.
Something what, so and so and whatnot. And I think
Mm.
that if we're really trying to treat the whole person, which is our sort of way, I guess, our
Yeah.
methodology, that whole person, obviously, it's going to be physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, all of that. And that's, I think, what's going to create the best long-term results
Yeah.
for the clients that we work with.
Oh my gosh. You're doing it.
Yeah. Well, so are you in your way, right? I think it sounds like to me from what you've experienced in the past,
Yeah.
and you've been through the whole gamut yourself,
Mm.
and you've also explored the academic route for what you've been studying, and now you
Yeah.
have this other sort of realm that you're in
Mm.
that's sort of like it's coming full circle for yourself. So
Yeah, I do feel that way.
yeah, it's
I
powerful.
really do. It is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am such a multifaceted thinker and just person in general.
Mhm.
Being non-binary, it's
Mhm.
like a huge part of how I access all things from kind of like a non-binary lens of like there must be something beyond what's been given to us.
Mhm.
And when I was in school, I had such a special experience of being in my education program because it was so practice based. There was a school for children on the bottom and the grad school was
Oh,
on top.
really?
Yeah. I mean, there was like a tree growing out of the center of the building. So I was like, I'm in the right place. It's very
I've
special.
never heard of that.
It was so, so, so special.
Yeah.
And Columbia is a Ivy League school. And for me, I think I just wanted to be there. I just wanted to be doing the work. When I was at Columbia, I was able to apply for another concentration within that program called dialectical behavioral therapy,
DBT.
DBT.
Yes. So I have a clinical friend in
Mhm.
psychology who's much into that, and I've been learning from her what that's really about. But that's
Yeah.
funny you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool that you have some schema for that
Yeah.
too.
Cool.
The reason I wanted to, I think maybe in hindsight, the reason I really wanted to be a part of that program was so that I could work at Rikers, which is the jail,
Yes.
infamous jail
Yeah.
in New York.
Right.
So I taught DBT while I was in grad school to folks who were incarcerated.
How'd that work? Did it work? Like, was it effective? Was it?
I do think it was effective.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about like there's micro, meso, and macro,
Mhm.
right? Like what you are talking about in terms of helping one person is the micro.
Yeah.
But you're also bringing in the meso, which is like the bridge between micro and macro.
Yeah.
Like multiple specialists or professionals helping one person who has all of these different experiences contained within them.
Yeah.
And then the macro is something that we can't not be affected by also. Systems,
Yeah.
culture,
Yeah. The bigger scope.
the bigger scope, the
Yeah.
global society,
Yeah.
things that are happening around the world impact us.
Yeah.
And so when I was in school, I wanted to just like be a part of that in any way that I could.
Mhm.
And I do think it informed, the kind of holistic approach that
Yeah.
I use and that it sounds like you're getting up to.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. So with physical therapy, we often focus on movement restoration, getting people back to performance and after surgery and stuff like
Mhm.
that. What do you think are ways that maybe for somatic practices that could help recover or help support people in recovery who are on this path towards getting to their better self?
Yeah.
What do you think are things that you might want to share with people who are on that path to get to where they want to be?
Yeah, what a great question. I think the first thing that I feel into when I just take that breath,
Mhm.
right, answering that question is breath.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because people call us the breathing therapists, the breathing PTs,
Amazing.
because we do a lot of breath work to help restore certain kinds of
Amazing.
stuff inside.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, at the very least, just to engage the nervous system that way,
Mm-hmm.
the parasympathetic, just to get people to calm down because everyone's amped up when they're in pain.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get that sort of like chillax kind of thing
Yeah,
really helps a lot as far as that person to be receptive to what we're trying to do,
absolutely.
but also the body's receptive because if we're going to do something, if you aren't ready for it, it's just not going to, you're not going to be able to access movement, number one.
Exactly.
So,
Well, I think you spoke about the goal that I heard from you was something sustainable.
yeah.
Right. And when we so often top-down approaches are forceful or dominating,
Yeah.
right? We are trying to dominate the body.
Yeah.
We're trying to make it do something different. We're trying to push it into a
Yes.
thing.
Rein it into
And it's like,
our
God,
desire.
body, why are you doing this? Right? You're ruining my life.
Exactly.
And pain is so fascinating because it pulls us into the body.
Yeah.
And then we're having such an experience with the mind where we are resisting the experience of being with the painful sensation.
Yeah.
And it's just so normal.
Yeah.
We don't want to be there. It hurts. So what it sounds like folks could really get from somatic therapy, in addition with what you do, is this experience of slowing down.
Imagine that, Bergen County.
Hello. I know.
In a tri-state area.
We talked about how we're not, we don't live here.
Yes.
So it's so amazing that we met and to do this.
Absolutely.
I experienced such a shift in my nervous system leaving New York, living in Virginia. It's something that I'm still coming to understand about the pace of things. People say, y'all, they speak slower.
Yeah. North Carolina, same thing.
They move at a different pace. It's a different rhythm.
Very different.
And it's an unlearning for my nervous system. I was I was born in New York. I was raised in New Jersey. My mother is the fastest woman alive. You know?
She beat me, so I can tell you that's absolutely valid.
My dad works all the time. They're really good at what they do. And there's an enormous discomfort that comes from slowing down.
Yes.
I am going to say that as a blanket statement.
Yeah.
I think for most humans alive,
100%.
it's really, really uncomfortable to slow down.
Definitely.
And I think there's an important aspect of psychoeducation, of just like education around the body and anatomy and pain.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that when you slow down to be with pain, you're going to make it worse.
Mm.
And sometimes that does happen. When you're with a sensation that you have been avoiding
Yeah.
or ignoring, like a baby crying, it's going to keep crying.
Yeah.
It's going to keep asking for your attention. And interestingly enough, with babies, like there's, we have an attachment relationship to our bodies the same way maybe we have attachment relationships to all other human beings.
Yeah.
And so the big part of somatic work for me is partnering with this body, making this body a partner
Yeah.
in the work. So if you are just noticing that when you slow down, it's really uncomfortable, you don't want to be there, that's just really good information.
Mm.
That's really good information to know. I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be there.
Just acknowledge it.
Just acknowledging.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like what's happening to me right now.
Mm.
And so often in somatic work, I bring in something called like parts work, which
Oh.
is from Dr. Richard Schwartz,
Mm-hmm.
and somatic experiencing from Dr. Peter Levine. I like bring a lot of their work in together.
Mm.
And it's about noticing what parts of you have some feeling about what's happening.
Mm.
So there's a part of you that's probably, I could make an assumption that there's a part of you that is frustrated with
Mm.
experiencing pain. There's a part of you that might be exhausted. There's a part of you that might wish you were different,
Yeah.
or that you were better already. And so, like you said, acknowledging, it's like there's a whole system at play here
Yeah.
of parts that have an opinion
I like that. Yeah.
about what's happening.
Yeah.
And if we acknowledge all of that, we can sometimes get to a level of just being
Mm-hmm.
with that experience without kind of all of the extra
Right.
pieces that we're basically trying to unlearn
Yeah.
or learn how to be in more like right aligned relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have to dominate those parts of us. We can say, oh my God, of course you're exhausted. Right? Or that patient that you said that had that like release from her hip.
Yeah.
It's like that did happen to you. Something really painful did happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, in therapy, sometimes we call it things like a corrective experience where you're able to express and be held.
Mm.
This could happen with anybody, with a friend, with a therapist, with a physiotherapist, with nature. I'm going to bring in nature as much as I can
Mm-hmm.
because there's an unconditional love that comes from nature.
Mm.
And the point that I'm bringing up here about like someone can be there to hold you and not dismiss you in your pain.
Mm.
And it's really, really, really vulnerable.
And I'm going to say that, especially with guys.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I'll tell, like, it's to let your guard down,
Mm-hmm.
to, especially if you are with family, maybe living on more traditional roles where you're the provider and whatnot, in that sense, and not wanting to show that weakness or show your pain or even express it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably one reason why guys die sooner than their spouses.
Wow,
Is
yeah.
because they just tend to ignore things to the point where, I don't want to think about this. I don't want this to slow me down. I don't want to not be there for my kids and
Right.
my wife or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, they're suffering on the inside because they're
Yes.
not speaking to the pain or partnering
Mm-hmm.
with that side of them.
Yes. Yes. There's such an interesting dichotomy of like female relationships versus male relationships. You've probably heard that like, guys will maybe like sit next to each other
Mm-hmm.
and look in one direction, like playing video games
Yeah.
or playing basketball or sitting in the car.
Yeah.
And there's something about female relationships where they'll like turn towards each other and look at each other. And I'm sure there's an example, like, hunters and gatherers, like men were
Yes.
hunting beside each other,
Yeah.
and like femme presenting folks probably had
Right.
to like literally look at each other,
Yeah.
talk about herbs and what
That's
they were
right.
gathering. And that stays with us in our viscera.
Mm.
That experience of if I do something differently, I could be cast out of the group.
That's an
So
interesting
this
point.
goes way back.
Mhm.
The very back of our brains, the oldest
Yeah.
primal lizard
Yeah.
brain,
Lizard brain.
is the one that's going to tell us like, am I belonging
Mhm.
to the group? And that is so much more psychological. Obviously, we can talk about belonging, right? It's like one of my favorite things to talk about.
Well, it's funny because, like, even with us, when we ask patients questions, it's rarely to find about what the physical drivers are or even the external drivers. Why do we get back to golf? Why do we get back to running?
Yes.
Well, it's because whatever, when we hit that emotional point where it's like, it's how when I was growing up, I was teased of my weight, and this is how I lost my weight. And I had this big fear of going back to that. And so, like, touching to the emotional side is what we're really trying to go after. Because I know at that point, we know that we can convince them to say that this is why you need help now.
Mhm.
It's time for you to stop putting this off.
Wow, it's so amazing to hear that from another guy. Sometimes
Mm,
we could hear the same message over and over and over again,
yes.
but it's very important who can get in.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and you were talking about like receiving
Hmm.
as an aspect of sustainable care, like
Yeah.
when the body is not constricting, which
Hmm.
I do think we are probably constantly in a state of
I
constriction, fight,
agree.
flight, freeze, or fawn, that
100%.
sympathetic,
Yeah.
which is an extremely important aspect of our lived experience. We
Yes.
do need to be activated
Yes.
and to have judgment.
Yeah.
Is this milk bad? Right? But then when the milk is not bad and we've made that call,
Yeah.
we do need to be able to go over that
Yes.
hump, take a deep breath,
Modulate and
modulate, get back into
yeah.
homeostasis, find balance, come into parasympathetic.
Yeah.
So parasympathetic, that's happening if you take a yawn,
Yeah.
if you swallow,
Hmm.
if you take a deep breath. And some ways to like offer an invitation into parasympathetic is by extending your exhale just
Yes.
1 or 2 seconds longer,
Yeah.
which from breath work, I'm sure.
Yes. Hmm.
But we're talking, when we talk about dudes and men, there is such an important aspect of community
Yes.
that I think you are really speaking to with this like multifaceted, it takes a village approach. We really need to understand how intense it is to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
even with someone that you feel safe with. And so I think one of the biggest things of somatic therapy that I've learned is that you can't seek safety outside of yourself. You can
Definitely.
you can feel good and you can go to good, safe people.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's you with you. And so where can you find, this is one of my favorite somatic practices, is where can you find safety within yourself? And so we were talking about the feet
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not all the time for everybody, but we can have like an experience of feeling our feet, and that can be grounding.
Very. Yeah.
I love seeing how folks respond to like feet, seat, and spine.
Mm.
So your seat, like literally your butt,
Hmm.
where you are seated,
Yeah.
what is underneath you, and
Hmm.
then what is holding your spine,
Yeah.
which is the longest column,
Yes.
up in here
100%. Yep.
that holds all the way to the base of our heads, which
Yeah.
is again, that hits that primal spot of when we
Yeah.
did not have control
Hmm.
over our own experience to hold up our heads.
Yeah.
And so when we're as adults, it's so nice to like lay down and feel the support underneath you, around you, in that subtle realm, and then of the physical realm of literally what is holding you.
Hmm.
And that is a really, really good one that I think everybody can do, and
Yes.
regardless of gender,
Yes.
can experience that,
Yeah.
and then know what feels good.
Yeah.
That is so important. I think our boundaries can be crossed when we don't know what is a yes and what is a no.
That's absolutely true. I feel like a lot of our job is as physios is to basically coach people on that.
Mm.
It's like you can still do what feels good, and here's your boundaries. Just
Yes.
keep those boundaries there until we get the rest of you to feel better, so that we
Mm.
don't go back into this not so good place again. And that we want our job is to try to keep you out of that place so we can continue moving forward.
Right. That
But
window of tolerance.
the
Yes.
problem is, as you know, in Bergen County and tri-state area,
Sure.
people keep wanting to push those boundaries. Like, well, I didn't
Yes.
feel bad, and I know Dr. Jerry said I shouldn't do this, but let me try it anyway because I want to get back into it. And they end up
Yeah.
back sometimes at square one,
Yeah.
and we have to have this conversation again.
Right.
But one of the things you touched on, which I wanted to bring up, is that even with guys, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of our guys, especially in the 40s and above, that we treat, a lot of ultra runners, a lot of hybrid athletes and whatnot, uh, their social life hovers around their community with their guys.
Absolutely.
And when they're out of that, it's the most depressing thing for them. Like when they can't keep up with their guys at a certain pace,
Yeah.
when they can't golf with their friends at a certain pace, when they can't lift as much as they used to with their friends,
Yeah.
they feel like you said, sort of like they're almost self-selecting, like maybe I don't belong in the circle anymore.
Right.
Cycle depression,
Yes.
downward spiral, other things happen, unfortunately. And
Absolutely.
those are the kind of people we want to try to bring out of that hole as quickly as possible, saying, why don't we try some things to get you back into that circle again?
And I could also make an assumption that if someone like that shared that experience with their friends, they would be met with that has happened to me as well. You know, then
Yeah.
you create the bridge of,
Yes.
it's so risky. It feels like such a
Yeah.
risk to be like, ouch,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I used to. I'm hurting.
Yeah.
It can feel really risky because there's the potential to be rejected, which
Yes.
is that whole aspect of belonging we were talking about.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because athletes do take risks. But this is a different
This
kind,
is different.
right? But it's just as
Definitely.
important,
Yeah, if not more important.
if not more important.
Yeah.
And I think also, you know, like recent athletes in the Olympics have shown us
Yes.
the importance of speaking to their mental health
Yeah, definitely.
as the same, if not more important, like you just said, as our physical health.
Yeah.
So I think the tide is turning, but for men in particular, I know there's just an enormous potential for pushback. And I think what would be an interesting question to ask someone like that too is like, what state do you want to be in? What's, you know, like an ideal state? And they might say something like a physical state, but I also wonder, like, how connected do they want to be to their bodies while they're in that state? How connected do they want to be to their buddies?
Is there an example that comes to mind for you, Molly, where you've worked with someone and had such a transformation from the work that you've done that might come to mind, or maybe in that process of transformation?
I work with someone who just wrote me a really beautiful testimonial,
Oh,
actually,
that's great.
and they're an artist and a writer. And so it was a beautiful testimonial. And it was very important for us to get that down on paper. Like, what's going on here? What are we doing together? How
Yeah.
have you been helped by
Yeah.
this? Sometimes I just love doing those like check-ins in therapy because a lot
Yeah.
of people don't know what therapy is, or they feel like they have to go, or they don't feel like empowered to say, hey, I want to do something different.
Yeah.
And so I love bringing that question in of like, how is this going for you?
Yeah.
What would you like? How
Yeah.
can I show up for you
Mhm.
in a way that feels like we're really serving all of you?
Yeah.
And so I had this person write this testimonial, and what they shared was that they felt like their body was like a familiar stranger. And so I
Yeah.
think so often in our homes, for a lot of us growing up, we are met with like emotional unavailability, or parents who don't know how to regulate their emotions. And then we don't feel safe being sensitive with our emotions. And someone in the field talks sometimes about having emotions as like a good poop,
Mhm.
where it's like these things need to come out. And you might have heard that emotions are energy in motion.
Mm.
And so the body does not like being stagnant.
Mm.
It likes things being in flow.
Yeah.
That's where the breath comes in. I mean, that's how the blood,
I love that. Yeah.
right? It likes being in flow. And that's why
Yeah.
athletes like that feeling too.
Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think the success that I have had with this client is offering a new language, one where they can understand what their body is trying to share with them. When something like heat starts to rise, is that irritability? Is that a boundary, right? Is your anger saying, I don't like this? And you don't feel empowered to say that out loud. Maybe it gets stuck here, right before the voice,
Yeah.
right? I think these are maybe common experiences that people can get, you know, like a frog in their throat
Yeah.
or something,
Definitely.
right? So
Yeah.
there's some kind of mechanism that's saying it's not safe to express.
Yeah.
So we work on slowing down, being with that. Sometimes messages come from the shoulders, they're coming up to the ears, right? I'm trying to protect my soft organs. There's something that the body is saying that over time we can just become more attuned to. And it's usually slower than maybe the desire of these like amazing athletes and humans
Sure.
that we work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's a time to be on and there's a time to not be on, and that's probably most of our day,
Speak on it.
especially with that. And I feel like because going back to our entire conversation about how it's like everyone is sort of like amped up and on,
Yes.
it is hard to definitely break away from that, modulate, and be able to get this sort of state of homeostasis that you
Right.
talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, what actually is your homeostasis?
Yes. People have,
They don't know.
there's no awareness
I didn't
there.
know.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the awareness of that. And I think the question that I was maybe really trying to ask about this gentleman who wants to get back to golf, for example, is, are you beyond capacity more often than you might realize? Capacity is such a
Oh,
wonderful
absolutely it is.
conversation to
Yeah.
have. I actually really love teaching people about spoon theory.
What's spoon
Have
theory?
you heard of spoon theory?
No.
Spoon theory comes from the disability community. Someone with lupus was at a diner talking to a friend, trying to explain what it's like to have lupus.
Mm.
And they had like a jar of sugar and a spoon to explain that when they wake up in the morning and they get out of bed, that's a spoon that's taken out of their jar. They take a shower,
Yeah.
they eat breakfast, that's like 2 more spoons. By the time they get to work, they're like 4 spoons down.
Mm.
And that's the way that I really like to explain capacity. Not everybody is like that. We all
Yeah.
have different jars,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? And I think that's also part of what this always being on aspect of modernity, like why that's so harmful and
Yeah.
what creates so much chronic pain, is that we all think we have to be at the same level.
Yeah.
And I think COVID and the pandemic has really thrown a wrench in that
Yeah.
for a lot of people, where work has shifted, where they're like experiencing being off or working from home or taking breaks for like the first time in their whole lives.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable. And then you're just left with yourself and all this extra adrenaline or cortisol that's like pumping through your
Yeah.
body because of caffeine. And I mean,
Yes.
I could just go on and on.
Yeah.
But I think this is a really important picture to paint
Yeah.
because how does your body react to caffeine?
Mm.
How does your body react to sleeping the amount that it does?
Yeah.
If we are a plant and we do need to be tended and gardened and watered and sunned, what are the actual needs of this animal body that needs to be tended to in order for you to feel fear? In order for you to feel,
Yeah.
in order for you to be with your feeling
Yeah.
instead of feeling like you need to push past it or that you're under it.
Yeah.
So that level of homeostasis is like kind of an elusive mystery until it's not,
Absolutely.
until you start to learn about what doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
what does feel good. And then you're just experimenting.
Mm.
Nobody really knows. That's what's so cuckoo about being alive, is that we all are extremely unique.
Yes.
And yet we do all have this nervous system,
Yeah.
this skeletal system, the musculoskeletal system.
Yep.
And it's really our job. I think it's my job to learn how to best serve this
100%.
body, this physical body, this spiritual body,
Your
this
partner, right?
mental body, my
Yeah.
partner.
Exactly.
Yeah, my bestie. And how would you treat your best friend?
Exactly. Yeah. I like that. It's
Yeah.
funny when we in our rehab process, the questions we ask, and you reminded me of this, is that I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman.
Okay, yeah.
So he talks about these pillars, and we also tell our clients before they start with us, these are a couple of areas that if we don't have a handle on these things, no matter what we do here, it ain't going to work to the best it can.
Mm.
Your nutrition, what do you put into your system? Your hydration, sunlight are you getting out there? What's your stress level like, 0 to
Yeah.
10? Even that's like, people are like, oh man, that's, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So just bring that awareness back into where they are. What kind of supplements you take, have you had your hormones checked, all these kinds of things, because if you're not in a good state, if your body, your bestie, isn't in a good state to be healed, I could throw the best physio at it, and it's just going to take forever to get better.
That's so true.
And if you're dealing with a lot of stuff up here, which a lot of our patients do, until we resolve this, you're always going to be worried about this. And that's just going to be magnified in your brain.
Yeah.
And that's going to really slow down the process of us getting you to where you want to be.
Yeah, I love how you're putting that. Because I mean, if the goal is to get better fast,
Yeah, right. You gotta go slow.
hello. We have to
Imagine
we
that.
have to slow down
Yes.
to go fast. Exactly. Yeah, I just can't like stress this enough. What we do every single day.
Mhm.
What are we putting in our bodies?
Yeah.
There's sometimes we don't feel like we have a ton of choice,
Mhm.
which is really painful
Yeah.
and frustrating and extremely like grief inducing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's really sad when we don't feel like we have control over how to take care of this.
Yeah.
And I think that when we can work with systems like folks who live in areas where they can get produce and sunlight, silence,
Yeah.
like
Solitude, all that good
oh yeah,
stuff.
these like aspects of pollution that
Oh my
maybe we
gosh,
don't
yeah,
think about so
yeah,
often, and
yeah,
how my nervous system is still unlearning that from living in New York. I
yeah,
love it. There's no place like New York. I love it. It's a huge
yeah. I went to Columbia too for
love
grad
of
school,
mine.
so I love, I mean,
There we go.
greatest city on earth, right? I
It's the
mean,
best.
yes. But yet being in North Carolina, like you, I mean, having more access to nature on any given day, so many trees and whatnot.
Yeah.
For me, one of the things I found powerful is to be in solitude. I'm by nature more of an introvert,
Hmm.
and so when we go to like the American Tobacco Trail, especially during times of day when there's nobody there, just that deafening silence is
Yeah.
just so powerful, and for me,
Mm.
it's very restorative. But
Yeah.
and especially if I'm dealing with people all day and hearing their pains and struggles, I have to be at
Yes.
my best too, and that's part of my self care as well.
Absolutely.
So, Molly, if someone had wanted to work with someone like you as a
Hmm.
somatic therapist, what's the best way to get in touch with you, to learn more about you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they could go to my website.
Oh, yeah.
It's mollybienstock.com.
We'll put it in the show notes.
That sounds great.
Good.
You can go to the contact page
Hmm.
and put in a little message of, maybe what you're seeking to um, do together, what you're
Hmm.
interested in. And if you do have any questions, you can put that all there and it'll go right to my email and we can be in contact from there. And then we can set up like a discovery call,
Yeah,
see if we would be a good fit for each other.
that's great. And the cool thing is that people can work with you virtually,
That's
which
right.
is awesome. Yeah,
It is awesome.
yeah,
I love what I do, and I love working with like all different kinds of people.
yeah,
It's it jives me.
yeah.
I
And it's
feel
cool because you're
so
making
good
a
about it.
massive impact virtually,
Mm,
and being able to do what you do to help heal other people by what you do is also great because that makes you versatile as far as who you can and wherever people are. Geography is not a limitation for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so cool because like what we were saying, we are so unique and yet
Yes.
we do kind of respond similarly
Yeah.
to our environments.
Hmm.
And I know that there are other urban areas, that could like relate to this
Absolutely.
on
Yeah. Yeah.
mentality. And yeah, if you live in the Richmond area, we can do some really cool in-person
Oh,
stuff.
very
And I
cool.
teach
Oh, you
workshops.
do. That's
Yeah.
cool.
My next workshop is called The Somatics of Self-Care.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And we get to do it in community.
Oh,
And
that's even
everyone is
better.
like so wise.
Hmm.
I can facilitate and create a space and a container, but everyone brings such incredible wisdom that
Hmm.
like weaves this beautiful web of this net that then we
Hmm.
all get to like
Experience and
be held in
taking. Oh,
together.
I love that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on our show. I'm so glad you got to share
Thank
about
you,
your
Jerry.
experiences, how you've had other people become a whole version of themselves. So,
Mm,
best wishes to all that you're doing in your field as well.
thank you, Jerry. Same to you.
Yeah, great.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least one or two helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.